All right. So we learned already that David likes fast cars. Um, you might also know that he likes sports bicycles. And a couple of years ago, when he visited Maastricht, I was literally like chasing him on my bike as he was on the bus because he didn't have a bike there. But I had to tell him where to get off. So I wanted to take this metaphor also with respect to his scanner because he's inspiring the field with awesome data. And people are asked kind of also us to deliver them data like that, but we don't have a scanner yet. So we need to chase after him. Specifically, I'm involved in this MGB Highfield Center in Boston, where we don't have an impulse just yet, but people are inspired by those kind of data. We have a neuroscience Terra X and a medical focused Terra X, and we have Bay 3 that currently looks like that. And hopefully in 3 months, it will look like this. A couple years after David. So we have a lot of catching up to do and need to chase him. And the things that are worth chasing after are the things that we already learned about, namely these high resolution fMRI protocols that have this exquisite detail of looking at and seeing these individual veins and then also seeing how Gray-Necker-Bold is has the spatial variance that's explained by these large training veins. But on top of that, you also can do blood volume imaging to see these layers. And these layers are very interesting for neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience researchers because these layers have different connections to different brain areas. So they are kind of telling you something about the direction information flow of the neural information within and across brain areas. So ultimately, layer fMRI is a connectivity method. So we need more than just high resolution in one patch of the cortex. But the other thing that's worth chasing after is whole brain layer fMRI. And I'm really impressed by those images of. So those are the things that we need to chase after. However, we have this clinical Terra scanner. And that's a scanner that's not like designed for high resolution fMRI, even though we use it for it. It has these bulky body gradients and face correction tools from the 90s. We can try to kind of retrofit it a bit and try to tweak it as much as possible, but ultimately it's always super awkward to use a clinical scanner for something that it isn't designed for. But that's my task. So I'm trying to retrofit the scanner and in order to chase after David and get similarly good images. And the things that we need to fix to get close to that are the things that David like points out to us. For example, this is a screenshot from his slide last Wednesday at the ISMRM brain function study group. So he shows the things that we need to fix. And namely, the good news is that it's not just like salt pepper noise, right? There are different things that we need to fix. Namely, we have these kind of dark shading patterns, the fuzzy ripples, but there are these kind of edge ghosts as well. And then sometimes you also see these kind of higher order phase interference patterns over there. So those are the things that we need to fix in order to chase after David. And we learned a lot about those issues in the last couple of years. And so I would like to explain this to you by first looking at an artifact-free image. So this is a 0.8 millimeter fully sampled EPI, which looks nice and artifact-free, but it also takes a long time. Like it takes 40 seconds to acquire 200 slices with sub-millimeter resolution. And I cannot sell this to my neuroscientist users when they want to do fMRI. So we need to be faster, and you can go to grappa 8, grappa 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and so on, and you see how the signal disappears and becomes unusable, right? Specifically at the time points that our cognitive neuroscientists would start to listen. But the point I want to make is the good news here is that it's not the G factor that holds us back. It's not the salt pepper noise that holds us back, but rather it's these weird signal inconsistencies. And those are things that we can work with, right? We cannot fight physics and get SNR out of nothing, but we can optimize the gradient quality to deal with those issues. So let's go through them one by one. So first we have these fuzzy ripples, these low spatial frequency shading patterns. And as we learned already, alluded from Jason, that those are largely caused by a mechanical inductive coupling between the gradients and the third order shim coils because they have this symmetry in their wiring pattern. So when you want to play out an EPI waveform like this, and you zoom into the top corner here, you do see these beat frequencies, these oscillations over there. When you unplug your third order shim and remove this inductive coupling, then it flattens out mostly, and you can nicely get rid of these fuzzy ripples. And then suddenly you also see kind of what other things that they were causing. Like, we are not really trained to see these fuzzy ripples. So as soon as you fix it, you can actually kind of see how the signal could have been if we would have identified those earlier. On top of that, we also have these edge ghosts, these stripe patterns over here, which are mostly coming from these short-term eddy currents that Jason already mentioned. So when you want to have a nominal gradient form like this one, what the gradient gives you is something like that. And at the time scale that are relevant for EPI, we don't have a lot of tools available to correct for that from the vendor. And so basically, what you can do is you have your gradient waveform and you just shift it. You have the delay correction. However, for EPI, we are specifically also limited by these short-term eddy currents in a range of less than 0.5 milliseconds, which right now on the clinical Terra X scanners are not being accounted for based on interactions with David and Samantha and Michael Köhler now in the newer software versions beyond XA60, and they might be accounted for. They're partly coming from the third order shims as well. So when you unplug your third order shim, you can see that those errors are reduced. They're not perfect yet. With the vendors together, individual people in Siemens can help you to also include those short-term eddy currents in your eddy current compensation, Michael Köhler specifically here. And when you do so, you can get rid of these edge ghosts here and clean up the images, specifically those parts. Then also, we have these other interference patterns that can be coming from higher order phase errors or just bad B0 shimming. And I would like to see how we can try to account for those by using the model that David taught the field how we can think about those a couple of decades ago, namely looking at the accumulation of phase errors during your echo train. So basically, as you go through K-space, you're accumulating these phase errors further and further and further. In the center of the line, everything's kind of well behaved in the sense that they're nice and smooth. So it's quote unquote just distortions. The bigger problem then comes along when you are in these K-space peripheries, because there you have these odd even jumps, and they are then resulting in ghosts that cause these interference patterns. The literature is big about this, and there is this dual polarity approach that Kevin already introduced that basically looks at calibration data, pairs of images with reverse repolarity, where then the sum of those two images, mathematically speaking, would be the same as the sum of those two images, basically just swapping the odd even lines from the reverse polarities. And now here we do have nice and smooth phase evolutions. So in practice, how this can be done is that you have the first 4 TRs or whatever with reverse polarity, and then you do see that these interference patterns are exactly opposite, right? The signal is the same, it's just the ghost has the opposite phase of 180 degrees. And then as soon as you characterize this, you can completely remove this. And this is now also included in the latest release of the software Laney, from the release from last week, to do this retrospectively also in image space after you acquire the data. So with all these different correction methods that we call Frisco, fuzzy ripple-free imaging with short-term gradient optimization, you can turn these unusable data into usable data. And you can push it much further to those timescales that neuroscientists then start to listen, which is in the range of like 2.5 second TR, and then make these unusable data usable. You can actually also push it further until you ultimately are being punished by the G-factor penalty here for a 32-channel overcoil. So this is quite exciting to have this progress of just focus on the gradient quality. And after we focus on the gradient quality, we can then try to chase after David and focus on the gradient quantity as well. So one rocket booster is not enough. We can add like a few of them. And while we are not anywhere close to 900 slew rate, like David is, and we can still try to benefit from the improvements that we have on these clinical scanners, namely the Terra now comes with these W60 amplifiers, allowing you to go to 250 millitesla per meter per millisecond slew rate. And this might help us specifically in high-resolution fMRI, which I would like to explain by looking at the switching rate here. For some switching rates, those body gradients have very big, bad, forbidden frequencies, mechanical resonances. And now with these new amplifiers, we technically would be allowed to go to the other side of the forbidden frequency and not being stuck with these echo spacings bigger than 1 millisecond. However, with the upgrade of these new amplifiers, also we had an upgrade of the new PNS model, which exactly blocks exactly that. So we are again stuck with the echo spacings less than slower than a millisecond. So in order to chase after David, we can then try to just massage the PNS, and which I would like to explain here. So when we have a gradient that goes from gradient 1, the slew, to gradient 2, we have kind of this boxcar of our slew rate. And then the PNS is sensitive to the slew rate on a given time scale, specifically the time scale that we are interested in EPI protocols. It's basically a low-pass filtered version of the slew rate over here. And when we run at about 200 slew rate, after 340 microseconds, we exceed the PNS threshold, right? So that's the maximum slew, the time of slew we can use. I'm showing you this to explain that there are different time scales or time points in our slew. Like, for example, at the beginning of the slew, we are more hardware limited. And then at the end, we are more PNS limited, right? So we can try to take advantage of the new amplifiers that we have to kind of go away from this just linear increase, but rather kind of slew as much as we can until we are at 90% of the predicted PNS. And then as soon as we are there, we just slew to have a steady state. So I'm going back and forth here again. So when we focus on the expected PNS, we can see that we are rising faster, yes, but then as soon as we are at 90%, we just stay in this steady state, having this elbow curve here. So when we take this elbow curve and we just repeat it over and over again, we can make it look like EPI. It's not exactly like EPI because now each lobe has a faster slew down after the lobe as opposed to the slew up. And this allows us to run these protocols that we previously could not run. And the frustrating thing about the conventional protocols is that these time points when we exceed the PNS safe model, they are very sparse, right? We have these spikes, these peaks, and they only like exceed the threshold at 5-10% of your sequence. But as a scanner operator, you still need to slow down 100% of your protocol in order to make it run. So Pope PNS optimized pulses for EPI allow us to tweak this a bit and only slow down the slew at the times when we actually limited by it. Now, with all this together, Pope and Frisco, we can run a few protocols that I would like to share with you. And one of them is here, for example, pushing towards whole brain layer-dependent fMRI, not at 0.8, but 0.9. And with 0.9, then we really benefit from Pope a lot because we have this kind of moderate speed up with Pope, which gives us maybe 15%, 20% of our kind of temporal efficiency, but because it allows us to jump on the other side of the forbidden frequency, we suddenly have a huge boost in speed, and we can do this in 1.7 seconds, which is something that neuroscientists seem to like. Other protocols that benefit from Pope and Frisco are, for example, the so-called mesovein protocols, protocols that Farooq Gulban is being advertising a lot with Rudi Stimberg's sequence. And I like them a lot because they allow you to see these intracortical veins in there. However, with 350 microns, you see them sometimes when you know where to look for them, but they're not there always, right? So if you want to use this routinely for fMRI signal interpretation, we need a bit higher resolution. So with Pope and Frisco, we are pushing this to 280 to capture all 5 orders of magnitude of the spatial scales of the angio architecture, basically not only seeing the centimeter sinuses of the big veins, the millimeter leptomeningeal vessels, the 100 micrometer pile vessels, but then also seeing these blooming effects of these intracortical vessels robustly across the cortex, so we can interpret our bold signals better. Okay, so do I have maybe 1 or 2 more minutes? Okay. So I want to show another protocol where I'm chasing after David, and maybe I'm not chasing after him so much here. I'm more. I know I'm behind, and I'm still enjoying the scenery because we have the Swiss Alps here. Basically, what I want to say is that these data, while they're old, they still have a lot of detail in there to be dissected. And while David is moving on to further also exciting protocols, we can still try to kind of use our clinical scanners to look at those scales in more details. And one of the things, for example, is that you have sometimes these small veins. I'm not sure how well they come across, that don't really have a huge fold bias. Why is that? Well, one thing that didn't make it into the paper, but is in the data, are these negative voxels that are more pronounced as you go to higher resolutions, and you don't really see so much at 0.8 millimeters. And those are features that some folks are interested in. So to look at those with 0.3 millimeter protocol at our Terra X now, we try to dissect them and try to characterize them. And on the first glance, you see a lot of, like, it's a huge mess. There's all stuff going all around, and on the first glance you're not sure if what is noise and what makes sense and what doesn't. But like, as you dive in and look at it closer and closer, there are certain modes of spatial organization popping up. For example, you do see more and more stripes popping up. Here, for example, I do like to interpret these different three stripes as the like feed forward versus feedback layers here. But you do see it's not covering all the cortex. Sometimes, like this blob here, it's right between of those two stripes. So what is that? Is it noise? Is it not? But now with these high resolutions, you can actually follow them, like these individual vessels in 3D. And you do see on the left in the function, on the right in the EPI underlay, how we have these individual vessels going through the cortex, and you can interpret this mess of spatial variance that we see in bold. But importantly, also, we see a lot of these negative vessels quite consistently. And this is something that Alessandra Pizzuti in the layer group was interested in. So she looked at these vessels and was tracing them back to see where they're connecting to. And without exception, she always finds that those negative voxels are connecting to the big arteries in the brainstem. Which is also something that we see quite consistently across participants, that we not always have these big blobs that always explain maybe 90% of the overall variance, the big veins, but then also we see these stripes within the cortex that sometimes align quite nicely with the diving veins, ascending veins. But then importantly, we always have these negative voxels, which seem to be explained by blood volume dilation. So we have a vasocontamination in bold, which is a bit ironic, and not to have it the other way around. All right, so with this, I'm looking forward to more years of chasing after David and making a good use of our own impulse when it's there. And I thank you for your attention.